What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. We've been kind of messing around with some ways to expand on our current list of more informative content, and we've been working with our Challenger analyst behind the scenes, specifically in this video, our Challenger analyst Painless, and we came up with a pretty cool idea that we thought would be fun to explore. So as the title implies, we're looking at a few different types of baits that you can use to get an advantage in your games over the enemy team. One of the biggest issues lower elo players have is that they can struggle to close out games, so learning some effective bait tactics can really benefit you if you want to force the enemy team to make a mistake that your team can capitalize on, and overall just make some awesome strategic plays. So let's jump right into today's list, and if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like on it or let us know in the comment section below, and be sure to subscribe for some more videos. So our first bait of the video is going to be a topside bush invade. Most people are aware of the advantages of invading, of course, if your team stays together in the early game, because you can very easily pick up an early kill, find someone AFK or just not paying attention, and pretty much always take a buff in the process. Currently in League, people kind of default to invading with the bottom side jungler, no matter which side of the map you're starting on. So our analyst notes that in his personal experience of high rank in Challenger games, if you get your team to 5-man invade topside, most top laners are going to be completely off guard because they're just not expecting it. And a lot of the times you'll find someone who's AFK, not paying attention, or for some reason just doesn't react to your invade properly. One of the best paths if you're on blue side is to go through the enemy top laner's tri-bush, then loop around past Krugs and head down to red buff. You can often catch the enemy top laner in that tri-bush, but if he's not there, you can usually catch them in the red buff and maybe even catch the enemy jungler there too. If you're on the red side, then you can go through your own top laner's tri-bush down into the blue, and then looping around the jungle to head back to your own raptor camp is a great route that gives you a lot of opportunities to catch out a stray individual. It can definitely be a little bit tricky to coordinate in solo queue with your team, but the odds of invades actually being successful in solo queue is so much higher and just so much more reliable than actual team play if you can coordinate it. So it's definitely worth doing. Just make sure your team follows, and make sure that the person who's face checking is someone that has a crowd control ability to guarantee them the chance to get involved and catch someone out right away if you find someone. So depending on how late the invade is, you can wait around to take the buff from the enemy jungler, or just head back immediately, buy some more potions or a ward or something. Either way, it's going to be a huge early game advantage. So we've talked about previously in a few videos about overstaying and how it can be a really big mistake and is probably the most common mistake players make, but there is one bait that you can use to take advantage of it following a really strong push. Let's assume maybe you just took an inhibitor or a tower or something, some sort of objective, and that all 5 of your teammates are still alive. If you're not super low on health, it could be a good idea to have your team sit in a bush and have one of your players bait the enemy team into face checking you. Most of the time after losing a fight and an inhibitor, players kind of just trickle out of their base one by one to stop the minion waves building up. You know, they kind of scatter. Some people go clear top lane, some people go clear mid lane, maybe another person's going to red buff. You kind of get the idea. Maybe someone's trying to ward or something like that, and the enemy team will usually pretty much always just assume you recalled, or you went to try to take Baron or Dragon or something, or maybe you went to go back and take your own jungle. Either way, the point is they're really not expecting people to be in their jungle in this sort of situation, so you can really catch people completely off guard once you spring the trap from the bush. Of course, you need to be careful. Definitely always check the bush for wards to make sure that, of course, they don't have vision on you, but you can very easily turn that, again, free kill into another push to take further objectives, or a Baron, or maybe even a push for the Nexus. Okay, so far we've kind of talked about strategies that require a good amount, if not your entire team, to participate, but there's definitely a lot more ways you can bait enemies even when you're fighting with reduced numbers. For example, if you're up against an enemy player that is standing with a teammate, you can usually bait one of them by acting like you want to kill the other. Walking towards one of the enemy champions basically signifies that you're trying to attack them, and it often encourages the other player to walk towards you. If that's the champion you really want to fight, it turns into an effective bait strategy that can let you set up a really easy skill shot, since you're now able to predict how they're going to move. This strategy works especially well with champions that have very key skill shots like Thresh or Blitzcrank. Just walk straight towards the player you actually aren't trying to attack, and then throw out your skill shot towards the other one. If they're walking in a straight line to counter you, they'll have almost no way to escape it without using flash. Most people fall for this all the time, especially during the laning phase down at the bot lane, because attacking someone that doesn't seem to care about you seems logical no matter how skilled you are at the game. It's kind of just an instinct reaction. So taking advantage of this strategy is a great way to get yourself ahead, especially as a support player down in the bot lane where you're kind of guaranteed to have some backup after you land your skill shot. Next up, we've got the classic Baron bait, which has become much more common over the years, but it still works really well because it has the key factor that a lot of these other strategies don't, where it does not allow the opponent to just do nothing, because if they do nothing, you can just take Baron. It's quite a simple strategy to pull off though, actually. You kind of just need to make sure that you've done a few important things first to actually set up. First up, definitely get a control ward on Baron to deny enemy vision of the pit for an extended period of time. You know, sweeping it is probably not enough because they can just ward over the wall again. So you really want to have some sort of prolonged vision denial in the area. Next up, you can sweep the river to deny wards and force the enemy team to have to face check or re-ward Baron. You want to place also some wards in the enemy jungle near Baron, such as in the Tribush, the Raptor camp, and behind the Baron pit wall. All that you need to do then is wait for them to walk towards the Baron pit and focus down the first player that steps just a little bit too close. If they came as an entire team with one guy in front, you can pick them off and then take an easy 4v5 fight. If they send only one guy to check you, then you can maybe start doing Baron to force the rest of the enemy team to respond. Now it's key that you don't want to actually start doing Baron unless you want to force the enemy team to make a move. That's kind of like your last ditch effort in order to make the strategy work, because you're going to take a lot of damage from Baron and can kind of set you up for some counterplay. The worst case scenario is that you maybe pick off one enemy player for free, but a lot of the times, especially if you're just a little bit ahead in the game already, you'll get a team fight win and a Baron buff out of this if you can coordinate it properly in solo queue. Of course, the tricky part is coordinating it, but if you take the time to maybe explain the plan beforehand, it's simple enough that it goes quite smoothly. Just make sure that you don't actually start doing Baron before you absolutely have to, because otherwise you're going to really open yourself up to potentially getting collapsed on and really just take a ton of extra damage for free. And that's really the main thing that happens that causes this strategy to go poorly for a lot of players, especially with the lack of coordination that things have in solo queue. Now the next bait might not necessarily net you some kills when you set it up, but it can definitely provide you with some pretty much guaranteed vision that the enemy team is definitely not going to expect, and is also a great tactic for some really higher level type of things. So the trick here is to place a control ward in a bush, but then also place a regular ward on top of it. The idea is that if an enemy player moves into the bush, they'll see the control ward, they'll kill the control ward, and then they're just going to assume that you don't have vision from the bush already, because why would anyone ever ward a bush twice? And with this strategy, it's also a great way to trick people into thinking a place isn't warded. You know, challenger players really are good at playing under the assumptions that key locations are warded. So finding a way to trick people into assuming otherwise can be a really clever way to catch them off guard, do something that they're not expecting. And even though this is kind of just a minor trick and is a very niche sort of strategy, it's really high level and is something that works at all levels of skill. You know, sometimes you might find a player that will find the bush and then recall in it because they just killed the ward since they believe they got rid of the vision. Something like that could definitely set you up for an easy kill. And this trick can definitely be combined with other bait strategies that involve wards. It's definitely a really smart way to build up your vision game without the enemy team knowing how much vision you really have. So our next bait for today is all about being unpredictable with your items. So as you move higher in the ranks, you know, players are going to spend a lot of time tracking your item purchases, but this tends to stop happening as much in the mid to late game, since people can kind of just predict or assume what you're going to build, or the build in general isn't going to have as big of an impact on the specific situation because you're not in the laning phase anymore. Which means you can very easily pick up items that are going to really surprise the enemy team because they wouldn't really expect you to buy it and they're not going to see it coming. Now the most common item to do this with is of course a stopwatch, and this bait works with any champion that doesn't normally build a stopwatch. Being able to pop a stopwatch randomly in a 5v5 fight at this point in the game can really make the difference between winning or losing sometimes, because the respawn rates are just so long. You know, just play super aggressive, totally act like you're caught out, but bam, you pop the stopwatch out of nowhere right as the enemy team uses their super important cooldowns on you. With these cooldowns gone, of course, your team has a huge advantage in the fight, It's a strategy that works best if you pick it on someone who's going to get really focused down hard, like maybe an AD carry or a really fed bruiser. You know, people will overextend and really dive in to try to kill you, expecting to maybe win the game if they pick you off first, but then you use the stopwatch out of nowhere, makes the dive pointless, and hands your team a chance to respond. The key though is that you have to do it on people who wouldn't normally build a stopwatch. So it's not a strategy that works for champions that are kind of just going to build stopwatch all the time. Either way, that's just about going to wrap it up for today's list of baits that people are going to fall for just about every time. We're trying out a few new interesting topics like this one, so definitely let us know if you liked it. We're going to leave a link to another one of our helpful gameplay videos in the description, so make sure you check it out and keep brushing up on your game knowledge. Either way, looks like that's going to be it for this one. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.